Okay, so we're going to go through the B6 inherited disease homework, which mainly had a focus on Punnett square diagrams and interpreting them. There were a few common errors, so we're going to go through that and kind of pull out those exam skills to maximise those marks. So question 1, some genetic disorders are caused by alleles inherited from the parents. What are alleles? And this was nice and straightforward. They are different forms of a gene. Now there's a distinction here. You can't say they're different genes. They're not different genes, they're different forms of the same gene. So eye colour gene, you can get a brown version or a blue version. But we're not talking about different genes, so a eye colour gene and a hair colour gene, they would be different genes and that would not count. So for this question, they've asked you to look at polydactyly, which is a genetic disorder which causes there to be an extra finger or toe. And it's caused by a dominant allele D. So that's an important thing to pull out there. They have emphasised what letters they want you to use. So they're going for capital D here for having the condition. The photograph shows the hand of a person with polydactyly. A man has it, his wife does not. The couple's children have a 50% chance of having polydactyly. Draw a genetic diagram to explain why. So let's start with looking at the Punnett square. So we know Dad has it. So he's going to have that capital D, that dominant allele. And we know that not all the children have it, so he must also carry the lowercase d, for a normal, healthy person. And we know because Mum doesn't have it, she must have two recessive genes, so the lowercase d is there. Now, filling in the Punnett squares, you were all pretty good at doing, so you can see those there. And we can see 50% have polydactyly, that capital D, lowercase d, and because it's dominant, they only need to have one capital D present to have the condition. And then 50% will be like their mum, have normal gene set, do not carry disease and do not suffer with it. Now, to get all the marks, you have to explicitly say that capital D, lowercase d will have the condition. Okay, you've got to identify the phenotype. So you've got to explain what these combination pairs of letters in green actually mean. Okay, so if on your homework it said identify the phenotypes, you've got to teach the examiners what those letters mean. So treat them like idiots. So capital D, lowercase d has a condition. Lowercase d does not have the condition, does not carry the disease. Here we've got another condition, which is cystic fibrosis, and it's caused by recessive allele. So you're seeing recessive allele being the cause. That means you need to have two copies of that gene to get the condition. The diagram shows the inheritance of cystic fibrosis in one family. So if we've got a white square, like we have in person 1 here, in person 4, 8 and 6, it's a man with normal health. And if they were coloured in grey, that means they have the condition. So number 7 has a condition here. So that is a woman with cystic fibrosis. We've got a key here with further details. Woman 5, so this person here in our diagram, is pregnant with her 4th child. What is the probability that this child will have cystic fibrosis? Draw a genetic diagram to explain your answer. Use the following allele. So they've stated what alleles to use. So N for normal health, that's dominant, you can see it's capital letter, and lowercase n for having cystic fibrosis. Now they've picked N here, I think because it's very clear capital lowercase letters, whereas if they just picked C, it would be a bit more tricky. So we know that person 5 here is mum, and we know already that they have a child with has this condition, so mum must be a carrier, but she's in normal health, so she must have the dominant allele here, but she's a carrier, she'll also have that recessive one. We also know that Dad must also be a carrier because person 4 and person 5 together have created a child which has cystic fibrosis. So that's where we've got the parents' phenotypes from, and you get a mark for recognising those phenotypes correctly. So let's fill in the Punnett square. and we've got our results. So as I said previously, you've got to state what these phenotypes, mean. So make a little note. So 25%, capital N, capital N, so that's normal health, not a carrier. 50% will be capital N, lowercase n, normal health, but a carrier of the gene. And the one we're particularly interested in is 25% lowercase n, so that person has cystic fibrosis. So they've got a 25%, 1 in 4 chance. You can express it in both ways to get that mark. So question 2 here is about eye colour, which is controlled by genes. The dominant allele of the gene B produces brown eyes. The recessive allele, lowercase b, produces blue eyes. A homozygous, so that's a really important word, the homozygous, so it means they've got 2 copies of the gene. Blue-eyed woman married a homozygous brown-eyed man. All their 3 children had brown eyes. Complete the genetic diagram. So, because I'm told, these come out in the wrong order. The woman is blue-eyed and homozygous. She's got 2 lowercase b for blue-eyed genes. The man's also homozygous but for brown eyes, so he carries 2 capital B's here, and that's the dominant gene. So if we fill that in, all the offspring have got a capital B and a lowercase b. Now you've not been asked to explain the phenotypes in this part of the question, that's for the next bit. So explain why all the children had brown eyes, because we were told already 3 of them had brown eyes. And it's because they all have the dominant allele, capital B, for brown eyes. They've got no other option. They couldn't, if the dad did not have the blue-eye gene, the offspring could not possibly have blue-eye genes. So, question B, we're now talking about the next generation. The couple's brown-eyed son and his brown-eyed partner have 5 children. 2 of the children had blue eyes and 3 of the children had brown eyes. Use a genetic diagram to explain how their children came to have blue eyes. Now, if you go back to your Punnett square, we saw all the offspring of this original couple had a capital B and lowercase b. So they all had brown eyes, but they were blue-eye gene carrier. Now, because we know that this couple have brown-eyed and blue-eyed children, that both parents must be carriers of a blue-eye and brown-eye gene, so a capital B and a lowercase b. So we put that down and then we fill in our Punnett square and we can see the different scenarios. So we can see that we've got capital B for 25% will have brown-eyed homozygous phenotype. 50% will be capital B, lowercase b, so they'll have brown eyes but be a blue eye carrier gene. And 25%, that's one they were interested in, will have a chance of having blue eyes because they carry the phenotype lowercase b, lowercase b. Again, we're making it really explicit, not just leaving it at the diagram, why they can have blue-eye children. Right, question 3 is about genetic disorders. Some people are heterozygous for a genetic disorder. Define the term heterozygous, so we've already talked about that. You could say having 2 different alleles for a gene, or you could say something like the dominant and recessive allele for a gene, having both of those. So this was quite a complicated question with many steps to go through, but the setup. The figures show the inheritance of a genetic disorder in a family. Person 7 and person 8 plan to have another child. And we've got a key there to show male, female, has the disorder, doesn't have the disorder. Determine the probability that the child will be a male who has the disorder. You should draw a Punnett square diagram, identify the genotypes of person 7 and the genotype of person 8, identify the phenotypes of each offspring, and use the genetic symbol. So H equals dominant allele, capital H there for dominant, and lowercase h for recessive. So your first step actually is to work out, well, what are the genotypes of person 7 and 8? Because I need to know that information to be able to draw a Punnett square diagram. So let's look at person 7. They have got the disorder, because they're coloured in grey, but their parents didn't have the disorder. So that implies that this is a recessive condition. Okay, So they must have been carrying the genes for their offspring to get it, but as they weren't suffering, it must have been a recessive. They must have both been carriers. So that must mean person 7 has 2 copies of that recessive allele, so there'll be HH. And person 8 over here, well, they don't suffer with the condition, and their siblings do, their parents don't, but as they have an offspring who has this condition, and we know it's recessive, they must also have this recessive, be a carrier for this genetic condition. So that we can say person 7, the father with the disorder, has a phenotype HH, or genotype HH, which presents as having the condition, and person 8 has the genotype capital H, lowercase h, and presents as not having the condition. So if we input this into a diagram, I've labelled up person 7 here, person 8. They will take that from the diagram, so you just needed, because they asked you to make it explicit, you need to make that explicit somewhere, either write a sentence like I've done, or when you put it in the diagram, that's also making it explicit. So we fill in that Punnett square, which you're pretty confident on, and we can see we kind of got a 50-50 split here, capital H, lowercase h, lowercase h, lowercase h. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So I've put our little Punnett square up in the corner that we've just produced, and I'm going back to that list of things I needed to do. So I'm making it explicit. 50% of the offspring have the genotype capital H, lowercase h, so they do not have the disorder, but they are carriers. So I'm identifying the phenotype there, the presentation. They don't have the condition. But 50% have lowercase h, so they do have the disorder. So I'm making it very explicit their phenotype there. They are presenting as having this condition. Now, the question also asked about what the likelihood of being male. So you could draw yourself, and a few of you did a quick little diagram for your sex, but we know it's 50% chance of being male, 50% chance of being female. So we're taking that information, 50% chance of being male, we've just worked out 50% chance of having a disorder, so half times a half, 25% chance of being male and with the disorder. Now, lots of us kind of got a little bit lost with that last step, but we were able to get all those previous marks, identifying person 7 and 8, filling in the Punnett square diagram, saying what whether the people are healthy or not healthy, or have the disorder or not have the disorder. So those marks are there to grab, okay, especially with these big scorers here. Right, part C. Polydactyly is a different inherited disorder. Two parents do not have any alleles for polydactyly in their ordinary body cells. These parents produce a child with the condition. Explain how polydactyly can suddenly occur in this family. Now, it doesn't actually matter that they're talking about polydactyly or any kind of condition. What's going to be the trigger for this is we're going to be looking at some kind of mutation has happened, some kind of change in the genetic code or the base sequence of DNA has happened. And this will typically occur during meiosis, or maybe when we can say when we have the production of the egg or sperm cells, or you could talk about during mitosis, during fertilization and birth. But basically, some mutation has occurred, probably during meiosis, but there's a few other exceptions. Now, that mutation causes a change in the amino acid sequence, and so if we've got a change in that sequence, the proteins being produced are going to be different, and in this case, they're going to present as polydactyly. So you're getting 1 mark for identifying there's a mutation happening, 1 mark for saying when that's occurring. So I've gone with meiosis here, but we did describe a few different stages you can mention. 1 mark for saying, well, that causes a change in the amino acid sequence, so in the sequence of the DNA, and that causes a change in the proteins that causes polydactyly. And that is where you get the 4 marks for.